Recording. Welcome to Order Militaris Radio TV. We are live once again. We welcome again Brother Alexis Bonello. And what a show we have for you today. Catholic clergy working as Nazi spies. No, this is not a movie, folks. It actually happened. Welcome, Brother Alexis.
Thank you, AJ, for having me back on Order Militaris Radio TV. Always glad to be part of this new media initiative, breaking ground for independent Catholic media.
Oh, boy. I saw your report on From Rome Info. I'm like, what a perfect show. And I start reading into the declassified OSS document. I was like, really? Okay, so who is this Hartle fellow?
First, let us say that both AJ and myself and this channel, we are devout Catholics and faithful Catholics. So not doing this show to throw dirt on the church, but bring to light the corruption that did exist and admit it for what it was, because that's just historic truth. If we imagine that everything is pure and holy in the church, when it's not, then we won't be motivated to correct what should be corrected and distinguish it from the things that should never be changed. So the religion is holy and pure and coming from God. But there are a fair number of people who, through the history of the church, have become priests or monks that weren't at all equal to the cause of Christ and turned on the church and turned against God and his people. So Hartle is, I'm going to say a really shining case of what a priest should not be. Okay, and Albert Hartle is his name. He was a Roman Catholic. He was a Bavarian. Let's just outline his life to get a good picture of it. He was born on the 13th of November in the year of 1904 at Rosenholzen in Bavaria. He attended school from 1910 to 1914 at the Hofkirchen in Bavaria. I think that's the church school. 1914 to 1919, he attended the Benedictine Seminary at Scheyern in Bavaria. And from 1919 to 1923, he attended the Archbishop's Seminary in Freising. In 1923 to 28, he studied theology at the University of Munich. And in 1928 to 1929, he attended the theologic school known as the Georgianum at Munich. In 1929, he was ordained a Catholic priest by Cardinal Faulhaber, who was a Rampolla bishop. And most of the bishops of Bavaria during the Nazi period were Rampolla bishops, and they are the same faction as Bergoglio and Mafia St. Gall, and who are currently running the Vatican. In 1929 to 31, he taught religion at an intermediate school in Passing in Munich. 1931-34, he was a Studienfreikirche at Archbishop's Seminary in Freising. And in 1933, he joins the Nazi Party, which was abbreviated the NSDAF. In 34, he was taken in protective custody by the Gestapo, and in January. In April of that year, he resigned from the priesthood and joined the Nazi secret service, the Sicherheitsdienst. We'll just say the Secret Service, where he spent his career with the Nazis and served them as an intelligence officer in Bavaria, Berlin, Russia, Austria, Yugoslavia. He ended up being attempting at the end of the war to flee to Yugoslavia, but when Tito was marching on Veld's, he fled back to Austria, where he was eventually taken into custody by the I think the British forces at Kitzbühel, Austria. And then he ends up in the hands of the U.S. Military Secret Service, the OSS, who interrogate him at length and write this long dossier, which we're going to speak and draw our information from. So we're presuming that information in the dossier is correct. It was obtained from interrogation of Hartel. However, at the end of it, the interrogators point out that because of Hartel's dubious character and morals, they can't be sure if everything he said is actually true in this. Matter of fact, anything that would be incriminating about him probably was left out. So this, as bad as it seems, isn't half of all the stuff he was involved in. And that is Albert Hartel, priest and traitor to his country and to his God.
His father was a member of the Free-Thinking Bavarian Teachers Association. What was this?
It was a rival group to the Catholic Teachers Association, and I don't know much about it, but I would imagine that they're kind of like unions or workers' representative organizations. And obviously by free thinkers, you see what, if it's a Masonic organization, it opposed the concept of Catholic education. And so his father was an ultra-liberal, even though he was baptized, and his mother was a devout practicing Catholic. And shortly after his father agrees that he could go to the Benedictine school and get at least a beginning education, his father passes away and his mother ends up taking control of his education, and he decides to become a priest. Becoming a priest in the 1920s in Germany, Catholic priest in Bavaria, was a rather common career decision of most young men. They made it before they even passed through puberty. They had no idea of the world or anything, and most of them figured it's just another job, another career. As we'll see with Hartel, by the time he becomes middle-aged, he starts having doubts about his vocation, and ends up to being a womanizer. And so he never really had a vocation to chastity, as far as we assume. He didn't lose the grace, he just never had it, because it was a career choice for him. And he probably made it because it was a good, comfortable life.
Yeah. This teachers union or teachers association reminds me of the teacher union we have in America, apparently.
Yeah, it would probably have the similar values, although probably not as decadent as the Teachers Union in America is, in favor of all kinds of perversions and putting children in the presence of perverts, which I doubt back then would have ever been tolerated.
Yeah. He also joins his Jesuit youth movement, Nur Deutschland. What is it?
So in the 20s and in the early 30s, there were a lot of Catholic youth movements. Youth movements were very popular in Germany, and the church had a number of them. So this one was kind of like a Catholic Boy Scout, and it taught them outings and things, and religion mixed too. But once the Nazis get in power, they passed laws that outlaw all youth groups and forced all the Catholic youth groups to merge with Nazi youth groups. So people often ask, for example, Benedict XVI, when he was a young man, he was part of the Nazi youth group, but it was mandatory. You couldn't even go to Sunday school anymore. You had to go to the Nazi youth training. So in most Catholic youth from the 30s, mid-30s onward are not even going to Sunday school anymore. On Sundays, they're spending all the time at Nazi training camps. And this was part of the Nazi ideal of stealing the youth as a way of robbing the future generations of themselves. And so, but the Jesuit youth group was very active, and Hartel was very active in it. He wrote many articles for its national magazine, and he met Jesuits from all over Germany, and was very much involved in the organization. It didn't really help him, though, because the Jesuit order in Germany was one of the biggest supporters of the Nazi Party. And actually, Hitler became dictator for life when the Center Party, which was founded by a Jesuit, decided to throw all its votes in Parliament in favor of the Enabling Act and declare Hitler dictator for life. So Nazi Germany wouldn't have happened without a lot of failures in the Catholic Church in Germany. And if you could sum it all up, was the Catholics who gave their allegiance to an evil man rather than giving their allegiance to a good man, and they were tricked by what I call standard Masonic political narrative control. Okay, so in the German parliament, there was the Marxists, and then there were the Nazis, and then there were the Catholic Senate Party, which had less power than the other two. So they were persuaded to throw their power with Hitler because they figured that way they'd be protected against the communists. But by doing so, they gave Hitler all the power, and they were forced as a party to dissolve and join the Hitler's party, the Nazi. So the Senate Party disappears, and 2 weeks later, Pacelli signs the Concordat with Germany, by which Hitler promised a certain amount of liberty to the church, which he reneged on that. So the Catholics gave up something real, power, okay, and got nothing back in return. And so they were hoodwinked, they were imprudent, but there was a lot of Germans in favor of it, even within the church. And we'll see from this dossier, the list of Catholic clergy who collaborated with the Nazis is very long. And so we're talking about a very widespread sin. The German church has had saints, many great saints in its history. But in recent centuries, it's only evils come out of it. They have failed to live up to the gospel, and they've spread horrible errors throughout the whole church. It's a really diseased part of the church, and the fact that they're trying to break off from the Catholic Church now and start their own religion and everything shouldn't surprise us. The German church has been deeply involved in some terrible sins and never really repented of what it did in Second World War supporting Hitler, because they would have had a moral change and didn't change at all morally. They were just as corrupt. The bishops today in Germany, most of them are just as corrupt as we were back then, although probably even more so morally speaking.
Why did Hartl turn to the National Socialist Party?
Well, he was already doubting his vocation, and he wanted out from all the rules of, as a priest, he had to be chaste and celibate, and he wanted to be a womanizer. So that's the kind of decision that comes from a man's pride and his arrogance and his, I can do everything on my own and I don't have to follow any moral law. So the Nazis appealed to him because they were sociopaths like himself. And he had already been involved in an incident where one of his chief professors who made anti-Nazi comments, he mentioned that to a party official and actually went to the court and testified against this professor and got him convicted. So after that, he really had no future in the Catholic Church, and it was, maybe he did it as a way of giving him an excuse to give up celibacy and break from the priesthood and the church altogether.
Who is his friend, Director Rossberger?
So Rossberger was a professor at the seminary in Munich, and he was a liberal. I mean, in class, he taught everything correctly. But outside of class, he would mock the saints, say the most scandalous things, mock relics, and mock the government. So Hartl was a good friend with him and a confidant, so he knew all the guys' insults and things. And Hartl, when it came to push and shove, because Hartl never was one to keep his mouth shut, he had no sense of discretion or even trust. He spilled the beans on his best friend, Rosenberger, and actually went to trial and testified against him, which was an extremely vicious thing to do because this man had never hurt him, had helped him in his career, and really only had minor faults. But if someone speaks about the government and the government's evil, that's not a fault at all. But it must have been something deep down that Hartl really just decided he was going to take the path of wickedness and immorality, and anyone who wouldn't accept that, he was going to get rid of. And so he becomes, in a certain sense, absolutely malign after that betrayal. Because when you betray one of your best friends over some trifles, then you've really shut out the whole world. You've chosen to be very antisocial, very demonic, and very antisocial.
You're listening to Ordo Militaris Radio live on Ordo Militaris Radio. let's see, ordo-militaris.net. That is ORDO-MILITARIS.net. And to support the Radio Apostolate, please click any of the show topics and scroll down to the very bottom. You'll see free will monthly subscription to Ordo Militaris Radio TV. Click the blue screen button, make monthly pledge of support, and follow the steps. And there is an awesome, beautiful flag behind Brother Alexis that if you let us know that you bought it because you heard our program or saw it on YouTube or BitChute, a portion of that proceed will go to the apostolate as well. How can you get that flag?
You go to ordo-militaris.us, not net like on the radio, .us, and go to shop flags, and you can look at the different Lepanto flags we sell. I could talk more at length about it, but let's go into the show some.
Yep. All right. Now, a name of a group they'll be hearing a lot is Heydrich, or what is that?
Okay, so when Hartl decided to throw his lot in with the National Socialist Party, he becomes an informant in their intelligence service, which was called the Sicherheitsdienst, okay, and or Secret Service, and that organization gets agglomerated to the national, like the Nazi version of the CIA, which was run by Richard Heydrich. So this is not the Gestapo, which was the political police. This was like the political intelligence agency, the Sicherheitsdienst. And so he was an intelligence agent for the Nazi Party. And at Nuremberg, this organization was classified as a criminal organization. And Reinhard Heydrich was actually hung at Nuremberg. And so when you see in the dossier the name Heydrich, it's speaking of Reinhard Heydrich. A little about him. He was born the 7th of March, 1904, so he's the same age as Hartl. He died on the 4th of June, 1942. Was a high-ranking German SS police officer during the Nazi era. One of the darkest figures in the Nazi regime. He came up with the whole idea of killing off all the Jews, the final solution. And anyone that Hitler wanted to get rid of, he had signed the task to Heydrich. So the fact that Hartl was working so closely with Heydrich shows you that he was really, you know, as the old saying is, when a man falls, he falls, but when a priest falls, he falls even from a higher height, and thus even into worse kinds of sins. And indeed, later in the dossier, you'll hear someone comment that he was a real womanizer because he had practiced chastity his whole life. So when he gave it up, he was just absolutely wild.
When he left the church, it talks about in the dossier how brutal the beating he got, and he was told it was by the church. Was it?
Okay, so well, I see. Once he testified against his best friend, who was a priest and a professor at the seminary, and got him sent to prison, he became odious among the Catholics of Bavaria. Was it the church who, in one night, they beat him up, or was it some Catholics who felt you betrayed a priest that we like? So I don't think it was. I don't think the Archbishop ordered or anything, but I think it was just general Catholic sentiment of you betrayed, you know, your own. And Germans have never tolerated treachery. They take a big step up. That's one thing that really gets them going. So Himmler said he had been beaten up by order of the church, but that was probably an exaggeration on Himmler, or maybe even an exaggeration on Hartl to make himself look like a martyr. Nevertheless, because of that, he turns to the Gestapo, and the Gestapo puts him under protective custody, which is kind of like he has police protection, so no one will beat him up. That was after that he pretty much had to cut his ties with the church. He knew that he couldn't go back. He would get beaten up again, or maybe worse.
And there was a little disagreement mentioned in the dossier between him and Himmler. when he didn't want him to leave the church or the priesthood.
Yeah, so Himmler, as of most Nazis, was a Bavarian and a Roman Catholic. And in fact, Himmler had an uncle who was a Jesuit. And the center party in Germany was a Bavarian party. So that probably had a lot to reason why it decided to support the Nazi party, because the Nazi party was also a Bavarian party, though it was a non-Christian one. So I think Himmler, as a Catholic, felt it was wrong for a priest to give up the priesthood. And maybe also felt that having a priest serving the Nazi party was going to give them more influence in the church, because an ex-priest would just be blacklisted. And I think that's what it was. But I don't think Harl wanted any more due to the priesthood, because he decided he was just going to pursue the path of evil. He wasn't going to live by righteousness or faith or honesty or virtue.
Let's see. What was Hartl's mission in Russia?
There's a lot of doubt about that, because we only know from Hartl really in this report, and maybe it's come out in other reports what he actually did. But Germany had an easy time cutting its way into Russia and conquered vast portions of Western Russia. So it had to assign the police, the Secret Service, the SS, and a lot of military just to govern the area, because it was just vast. I mean, we're talking about an area that's probably 4 or 5 times bigger than all of Germany. And so it was a task. But he was assigned as a Secret Service agent to an SS unit that was involved in the extermination of Jews. What he did, we don't know. What role he played, we do know that he was dismissed from service after attempting to have affairs with other men's wives, of the officers' wives, other soldiers' wives. He was quite shameless about it. When he comes back to Austria, his wife said he was a broken man, so maybe he'd also got involved in some really serious war crimes or atrocities, but he wouldn't explain what he did. And I don't think he was ever tried on that basis, although I don't know anything about his history beyond this dossier.
Hmm. Yeah. Let's see. Section 12 on page 10 of the dossier. Hartle contributed the statement that the EESS was by nature extremely romantic and exhibited many mystic tendencies. These mystic tendencies were encouraged by a certain member of the staff, Reich Eister Schult, Strauss, whose brother was an abbot of a Catholic monastery. This group was profoundly interested in the occult and had spent a small fortune on astrology, anthroposophics.
Maybe anthropology, archaeology.
Yeah, and theosophics and I can't read the last one, but
You're on page 10 or page 12?
page 10.
Yeah, so the Nazis were involved in creating their own ritual and religion, and it was a superstition. It was completely man-made. It was something to, use to rally the masses in their mass rallies, to give a sense of cult to them. But the SS had their own cultic center and involved in own cultic rituals, and whether they're involved in murders or sacrifices, I'm not quite sure up on that. But there is even there was a castle where Himmler had his own rituals going place, because Hitler was obsessed with these things. But even Hitler was said to have been involved in satanic practices of one kind or the other. You get that evil and you start admiring evil, okay?
Yeah.
And since most of these people were ex-Roman Catholics, they knew about the world of evil. So they at least knew something about it. Well, they weren't atheists. These people were not atheists. And so they got involved in things. The whole idea of wearing the skull and the lightning bolts on the SS uniform is not without coincidence. It's part of the image they want to give, because they wanted men that had absolutely no conscience, were willing to do everything, and thought virtue consists in absolute obedience. As a matter of fact, the whole exaggerated notion of Nazi obedience comes right out of Jesuit manuals. It's probably why the Jesuit order supported the Nazis so much. The idea that you do whatever you're told and you don't, and you no longer obey God, is a profound error, and it should be stamped out from Jesuit schools, but it's spread over the whole church. You should never show obedience to any creature to that extent. You are always obliged to uphold the moral law, which comes from God, and the evangelical law, which comes from God, and never to submit to a command of a superior to do anything of the contrary or to undermine those two. Same thing with canon law. We see it right in the church today. The cardinals support Bergoglio, and they all act like Nazis because none of them follow canon law, and they don't give a care about canon law. And when you tell them they should follow canon law and see and recognize that Benedict never resigned the papacy, they go on you with vicious insults. They won't ever discuss the law because they are Arnomian. They hate the law. They are sociopathic, they are psychotic, they're criminals, and they're a mafia. And above all, they're Nazis, because obedience is the only thing matter. But it's obedience to me, not obedience to Jesus Christ. So they're trying to steal Christ's lambs for their own little wicked and perverse desires. And this is all of them, because they're all quiet and they all say nothing. So whether they complain about Bergoglio or don't complain about Bergoglio, they're just as criminal and just as psychopathic, because they will not resist the violation of law, and they insist that law should be violated and ignored and interpreted any way they want to interpret it, which is not the Catholic religion at all. So the powers controlling the Vatican are not Catholic. It's not the Catholic Church there. Only Benedict's Catholic there, and no one takes his part. They're all out, even now while he's mourning his brother, to attack him. So this is very Nazistic. So it's not surprising that the House of Rampolla and Bergoglio, this coterie, all united together. It's a direct line of immorality streaking right through the church. And there was only a temporary waylay over in Nazi Germany. But this is just totally, it's not Christian, it's not Catholic, and has nothing to do with our church. These are fallen away Catholics. When Catholics fall away, they can end up doing a lot of evil.
Yeah. On that castle, it's talked about in the documentary Outer Shadows. There's a CIA black job general who still has all of his, clearance and all that. And he admits on camera he's a Satanist. And he's been to that castle and done the same rituals and whatever in that same chamber and all, with all the same stuff that Himmler did. And there's that one priest in the Society of St. Pius X who also is very sympathetic to the Nazis. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, well, we have to understand that it wasn't just Hartl who left the Catholic Church and joined with the Nazis, though it was a whole generation of clergy and religious who collaborated with the Nazis in Germany, outside of Germany, before Hitler started the Second World, during the Second World War, after the Second World War. And you can trace lines all the way from Germany to Argentina. Matter of fact, when Hartl decides to marry after joining the Nazi Party, who does he marry? He marries a woman of German descent who was born in Buenos Aires, but had come to Germany to court a husband, and she was working for the Nazi Party. Okay, so The fact that Bergoglio comes from Argentina is not a coincidence. Okay, is that in Argentina after the war was the center of power for the Nazi Party internationally, and still is. They have a lot of people down there who just won't admit that Nazis did anything wrong, and I've known some of them even in social media. They seem like perfect Catholics, but you start saying Hitler did evil, and they go wild. Okay, they will not admit it. They are not real Catholics. They are complete fakes, and they are sociopaths. And there are a lot of these Nazis fled to Spain. There's a strong pro-Nazi movement in Spain. There was a strong pro-Nazi movement in Belgium. The Vichy French government had a lot of really pro-Nazi kind of Catholics. Archbishop Lefebvre comes from Vichy, France. That's where he was an archbishop in Vichy territories, and a lot of his associates worked in or were in favor of the Vichy government. So we're talking about a whole malaise, and it goes back to this narrative control. Small-minded people don't realize that if you have the fascists on this side and the Marxists on this side, that you should not throw your lot into either of them. You should stay on the center with Jesus Christ and be willing to take persecution on both sides, but you never ally with either side. They didn't believe that. They put their trust in the Nazi Party, the fascists, the right wing, rather than putting their trust in God. Okay, and they never repented of that. They never turned aside against that, and they might have only toned it down, but they never really gave it up. So there's not only one priest in the Society of St. Pius X who was found with I think one who was found with a knife who belonged to Himmler. Many others have spoken in favor of the Nazis, and this is not a problem of the society. This is a general problem in Central Europe mostly. These groups around from the 1930s, 40s, and 50s who just were they were Catholics by baptism, but politically they weren't Catholic at all. Politically they were pagan and pragmatists of the highest order, and they were willing to make any deal to stay in power, which is a classic careerist kind of a person. You know, a priest who is holy, he's a pastor of a church, he wants to save people's souls, he preaches to save their souls. Everything else comes afterwards. But a priest who's not there because he's not holy, he only wants to get, you know, promotion in his career and make it look good. So he's willing to say and do anything to get the people to give more money, obey him, and so he can run the show, but not necessarily to save themselves. So in secret, he says, yeah, you can go have an affair, you can do this crime and that crime, God will forgive you, don't you worry, blah, 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 blah. Because he only wants to maintain control and power. And so that mentality flows out into the worst kind of politics. And these people are not holy, they're not faithful to Christ, and they weren't faithful to the church or to their nations. But we're going to see that was a fair number of them. We're not just talking about a small amount of Germans who collaborated with the Nazi Party. I mean, German Catholics. There was lots of them. Actually, from the point of view of what's in this dossier, we'll probably only see a small sliver because Hartl didn't know all their names. But it was a lot. There was a lot of collaborators, and at all levels.
I scrolled all the way down to page 18. Informants in Germany and Italy.
Okay, let me see.
And yeah, while you get there. And you're going to be shocked to how far this thing reached.
18.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't only the Catholic Church too. The Protestants and the Orthodox were involved too, but we're here to talk about Catholics, so.
Yeah.
Okay, 18.
Hartl estimates in every Catholic diocese and every Protestant main discussions, there were from 10 to 20 priests, monks, and other church personalities working for the regional SD offices. He himself came in contact only with key agents, whose contacts often reach to the cardinals of the papal curia or to the Pope himself.
Yeah, so some very high-level German clerics were collaborators with the Nazis, and provided the Nazis with information. Did they provide them information that, you know, wasn't just news and gab, or was it confidential information? This we doesn't say in this report. That's a summary in the thing. The one thing about this dossier is that it names names, so that you could even start writing a whole history on it. And
one priest that talks about the next paragraph is Roth.
yeah, so Roth, Joseph Roth, who was chief of Catholic divisions in the Reich's Ministry for Church Affairs. He had been an instructor for religion at the Student East and Herrenthesen Kirchschule in Munich. He was a Catholic priest, and he remained a priest until his death in 41, when he was buried with all church honors. Everyone in the church in Germany knew he was a convinced Nazi and had been Hitler's personal advisor on church questions before Hitler ever came to power. Roth maintained close contact with all Germans in the church, traveling to and from Rome, and got information from them. So he got a constant information about this. He exercised about the same power over theologians traveling to other countries such as Spain or the US, which were strong hotbeds of Nazi support. Got to remember, it was the American capitalists who refinanced the building of Germany, and Hitler's political program was very appealing to them, so they poured billions of dollars into the Reich accounts to rebuild German industry. And many a times when Allied planes were told to bomb certain factories in Germany during the war, they got cables from US companies saying, don't bomb that factory, we own part of it. And these companies that the American industries financed survived the war and allowed to continue business afterwards. So there was a lot of collaboration. Nazi Germany was not a phenomenon that just popped out of Germany one day. It was a problem that was an international problem too, of a really lack of morality and lack of Christian faith in politics. I'd say that was a core thing. So Roth was really a chief head of it all, and he regularly received Bishop Weinsken and Bishop Berning of Osnabrück. It was impossible for the Catholic Church not to be aware of the intimate collaboration between Roth and Hartl. They met almost every day in the Williamstrasse in Berlin, and often had lunch together in any of the one-known Berlin restaurants. Roth's special assistant, the Catholic priest and canonist Dr. Sebastian Schrecker, was well aware of the collaboration between Roth and Hartl. So Hartl wasn't a nobody. He collaborated with the Nazis at the highest levels in controlling the Catholic Church and suborning its members to serve the Nazi state.
Again, on
this
that,
is why.
Again, with the huge collaboration between companies and everything, in our program from Blog Talk Radio days, we did a program on the firebombing of Dresden.
Mm-hmm.
It was to supposed to take out the German military there, but the German military moved every single piece of equipment and men out of the city before it was burned.
So someone dropped them a little note. This level of collaboration between clergy and the Nazis makes me laugh when Bergoglio talks about people shouldn't act like Nazis, because his Episcopal lineage is the same Episcopal lineage of all these people collaborated with the Nazis. And a lot of the money in the banks there of the Diocese of Buenos Aires that he moved to the Vatican might have been very much money that had been secreted out of Germany after the war by many clergymen. So we're talking about complete hypocrisy here, because he espouses the same religion. Hartl's sense of what Christianity is and Bergoglio's sense is the same thing, except Hartl was more a sincere man. He took off the collar and pretended to be the Nazi he was, whereas Bergoglio keeps wearing the suit and claims to be a Christian.
An example of the close collaboration between Roth and Hartl occurred just after the death of Pope Pius XI. For one of his personal agents in the Vatican, let's see, Ninder Roth received the report that a majority of the conclave could be persuaded to support a candidate amenable to the National Socialism, provided Germany made a secret payment of 3 million gold marks.
Yeah, so there. Who was suggesting that? Can you imagine? So, where would that money have gone? It would have gone to bribing cardinals. And according to Hartle, the payment was never made. However, who was elected in that conclave? The Apostolic Nuncio to Germany, Eugenio Pacelli, who takes the name Pius XII. And what does Pius XII do almost immediately? He signs a concordant with the German state guaranteeing the freedom of the Catholic Church on the condition that the Catholic Party, the Center Party, dissolves and joins the Nazi Party. Yeah. And Pacelli said yes to that. And from that then on, there is no longer a Catholic Party in Germany. All the Catholics become Nazis. So Pacelli has been accused a lot in the press of aiding and abetting the murder of Jews, and there's really no evidence of that. But did he have a lot to do with the coming of power of Adolf? Yes, he did. And did he stop it? No, he didn't. And did he sell out Christ for the sake of some temporal advantages for the church? Yes, he did. And was he a candidate that was perhaps bought with 3 million marks of gold? I think historians need to investigate that.
Yeah. Which brings me to a man he hired to be put in charge of the liturgy, Hannibal Bonini.
Hannibal Bonini. Well, interesting thing about that is Hannibal Bonini, when he starts altering the liturgy, where does he get the crazy notions that he uses to alter the liturgy? He gets them from the German Benedictine monastery of Maria Laach, who had a crazy theologian by the name of Cassel, I think was his name, whose ideas of liturgy were adopted by the Nazis. Because according to this Cassel guy, when you enact the liturgy, you make present the spiritual mystery you're reenacting. Well, that concept of liturgy is witchcraft. That's not the Catholic concept. In witchcraft, you go through the ritual to invoke the spirit, but you're the one doing it and bringing it about. So your action is necessary. But in the Catholic system, it's God who has already decided, because he's promised to 2 or 3 in my name, whatever you ask in my name, he's already promised that. We don't bring God down to us, okay? It's not magic ritual. We have to be humble, we have to be chaste, we have to be faithful, we have to be sincere, we have to be and we have to be asking something that's in accord with the divine will. So it's not us bringing God down, it's us submitting to the will of God and accepting that for our lives, and God will give us the grace to accomplish his will, not our will. But Bonini puts into practice in the Reform Cassell's concept of the liturgy as something imminent, and it's really a concept of witchcraft, and that is what Pius XII starts putting into effect. So people say, oh, well, before the council, everything was good. Vatican II just didn't pop out of the air one day, okay? Vatican II's notion of the liturgy goes back to Cassel and the monastery of Maria Laach, and the theories that were adopted by the Nazi Party for the liturgy. So don't be surprised that Bergoglio is worshiping a pagan deity in the Vatican, Pachamama, and he has his episcopal lineage going back to these clergy that were worked with the Nazi state. It's the one same thing, because remember what Hitler said, Nazism will return, but not as a political party, as a religion, okay? Hitler said it, okay? And this is what these people are doing. They're creating a Nazi kind of religion. That's why they want you to wear a mask in church, and they want you to change your religion to fit their ideas. Christ can heal everyone of all disease. There's no reason to wear a mask in the church or receive him in your hand, okay? You receive him in your mouth and you'll be cured. Receive him in the hand unto damnation. So, yeah, there's big question points here that we can't ignore with Eugenio Pacelli and his association with these Nazi collaborators, big issues that go beyond the question of Jews and who was involved in that, because though it was a great tragedy that Jews were killed, a lot more Catholics were killed by Hitler than Jews, okay? And Pacelli has to answer for that too, because he's the one that gave Hitler the power to do it.
Oh, the question everybody's been wanting to ask, and I put it on the website. Was Bunini a Nazi?
Well, he was Italian, so I doubt he'd be a Nazi, but was he a fascist on Mussolini? I can't answer that. I don't know the personal history of Bonini, if he was a fascist or not, but where did he pick up this crazy idea? So he must have been at least reading German theologic manuals. As I said, the German church is highly diseased theologically and morally, and has been so since the Reformation. And there's precious little good that's come out of it since then, and a lot of evil. All the errors of Kant, all the errors of Schopenhauer, all the errors of the materialists, all comes out of Germany through Catholic intellectuals and Catholic institutions into Catholic seminaries, and then into the whole Catholic world, screwing up everyone's head. And the Germans are all behind it. Okay, if you see someone with a German surname in the English-speaking world and he's a theologian, if you wanted to lay a bet, 19 times out of 20, he's a crazy heretic. Okay, and I'm sure there's some good sound ones, but they're mostly all heretics and crazy-headed, because the German intellectual environment is just so infected with errors.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it has to do with German. German as a language is divorced from Latin and the Romance languages, so it never was in perfect. It was never civilized. It was never in perfect communion with the whole Christian tradition, and their words have a lot of different meanings that you can't really match up with Latin. So translating it back and forth may be difficult for them, and so they mostly think up their own little crazy ideas.
I got a book on studying Germany, and studying German. I was like, huh? Give me a study book of Latin or English any day. Wow.
Yeah, so many people who said, oh, I want to be intelligent, have an academic career, and they went to study in Germany, and they were all messed up. And they're just all messed up intellectually, because the German, I don't think German is a language like Latin where words have unchanging meaning. I think everything's up for grabs, because it was, you got to remember, Latin had been written for centuries before the Roman Empire fell. It had Latin grammar books and written like that, but the Germans were barbarians living in forests and hunting cattle, so what do they know about grammar? And German wasn't a written language until like the time of Luther. So do words have strict meaning? It's not. Latin has at least 2,000 years ahead of the game on German. So if you want a language of civilization, you're going to study something in Latin or something in Greek, because those languages, the words don't change. They're up for grabs. Yeah. They're not vulgar words. Not to say German could be good, but I think something must have to do with the language. There's so much errors coming out of Germany and so little truth.
You're listening to Order Militaris Radio live on ordo-militaris.net. To support us, and if you like what you hear, please go click any of the show tabs and show topics, and scroll all the way down. You'll see make a free will monthly subscription, and there's a blue-green button at the bottom. Click that, follow the steps, and thank you, and God bless you for your generosity. Now it talks about the SD office in Vienna on page 19.
Mm-hmm. So the SD is the Secret Service, and Harder worked for them, gathering information. He got religious orders to work for the Nazis, and let's just name the abbots of which monasteries collaborated with the Nazis. Which is first on the list? The abbot of the monastery Maria Laach. Didn't I just mention that one for coming up with the whole concept of Nazi witchcraft liturgies? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we could trace the Novus Ordo, which has ruined the Mass around the world, back through Bunini, back to Maria Laach, where the abbot who was promoting it, though he wasn't the author of it, Cassell was the author of it, was a collaborator with the Nazis. So we can say that the Novus Ordo is a Nazi liturgy from that point of view. It presents a form of the Mass which is based on the concept of witchcraft and is designed to attack and break down Catholic thought and make Catholics pliable to the Nazi political agenda, which, as Adolf Hitler himself said, was to bring back Nazism as a religion. Okay.
So you have Dr. Nuncio, let's see, Dr. Tissot was a case of open collaboration whereas the information received from the papal nuncio in Pressburg came through an agent within the staff, just as in Berlin. Prelate Dr. Peter Warren, apostolic administrator of the United Church in all eastern occupied areas with the rights of a bishop, was a personal friend of Hartl and gave him an interesting insight into the Vatican's work in Russia. Part of the text is missing.
Mm-hmm.
Was a former Ukrainian officer and as a Ukrainian an avid opponent of Polish Catholicism. Watson told Hartl that in him 3 souls were harmlessly combined. He still felt himself an officer, he was a bishop, and he was a friend of Germany.
Yeah, in this dossier, which you can find in the article, Nazi collaborators at fromrome.info, I have a link there for the whole dossier. You can read the names of many abbots, priors, bishops, clergy who collaborated with Germans who were known to Hartl. The list is much, much bigger than this, but these are the ones that Hartl knew by name. And for example, some of the names here: Archbishop Grober, a list of supporting members. These are informants of the Nazi state.
Yeah. Wow.
And Protestants too. He knew some Protestants. We won't mention that. And then the Orthodox. The Orthodox Archbishop of Germany was an informant.
Let's see here. Also, a former Catholic theology professor in Breslau, Professor Dr. Koch.
Mm-hmm. A number of individuals. Under intelligence sources at the Vatican, they had various spies there.
Yeah.
Kapler, who was dispatched to Rome in 1937 to establish an office of police liaison in the German embassy, was the chief intelligence officer for getting information on the Vatican. He was a Gestapo official, but his aim was to start a spy network at the Vatican.
Let's see here. Former Catholic monk and SS officer, Brigadier Karl Schaefer, remained in intimate contact with the monasteries of Western Germany, Holland, and Belgium, and handing over the intelligence gathered from these sources to the SD. Schaefer was at one time, big name for an officer, whatever it is.
There were a number of Benedictine monasteries, I think more than a dozen, whose abbots were collaborating with the Nazis. So you can imagine Catholics being persecuted by the Nazis in their simple mind, say, oh, I'm going to go take refuge in the Benedictine monastery. And little bit they know it, they were walking into a Nazi operational center and probably ended up being turned over to the Gestapo and dragged away and never heard of again. So it's it was a terrible betrayal, and it was very, very widespread. Benedictine monks have the last that they should be supporting Nazis. They had big estates, they had big properties. So, you know, why even collaborate with the government? You're an island unto yourself. So they really betrayed St. Benedict and that.
And we have another monk, Peter Bream, a Benedictine monk who had at one time played an important role in the economic administration of the Bavarian Benedictine monasteries, left the monastery and began to collaborate closely with the SD beginning about 1937. He was working particularly for the special retreat uh, referat to determine the economic power of the church, which he'd been set up in the
The OMP3 is the third office of the National State Security, RASCA. So,
yeah.
then the personal counselor of Prince Bishop Weitz in Salzburg was paid 600 Reichsmark a month to inform on him. And it's amazing how many got involved in it. Shows you there was absolutely these people were just psychopaths. They had no morals whatsoever. And they couldn't distinguish between the Nazi party and Jesus Christ. That's how spiritually blind they were. Just like today, Bergoglio makes no distinction between the globalist Marxists and Christianity. In him, there's just no difference. He's just totally spiritually blind person.
Yeah. SD in Prague also had excellent connections in the church circles. Through Czech theologians, Prelate Bob was one of their best sources of intelligence.
Mm-hmm. And then they had, here's something that should be mentioned. In Italy, the Verona office of the Secret Service maintained close contact with Cardinal Schuster, who was a well-known pro-fascist and extremely anti-Russian. While in the CIE 71, Hartl was told by former mayor of Innsbruck and the SS staff in Bolzano, Dr. Heinz, that Cardinal Schuster made it possible for the BDS of Verona, the SS group Hafter, and the HSPF in Italy to escape to Switzerland. So here we have evidence that Cardinal Schuster, who I think was recently beatified by Bergoglio, was a Nazi collaborator and helped war criminals escape. And this guy openly is known to have been a liberal and supported newspapers that were pro-modernist. So Cardinal Schuster, a Nazi collaborator.
Yeah.
So if you have a picture of him as a blessed, I recommend you take it down and burn it.
Yeah.
Because no saint would do such a thing.
Alexandria. SD Bolonzo again was able to submit excellent intelligence reports on church matters to ASHA for this office at Patriarch Hun, the former Archbishop of Prague, who had been active in the Vatican and was also honorary Patriarch of Alexandria as one of its intelligence sources. Hun was living in retirement in Bologna, had excellent knowledge of leading personalities of the Vatican, particularly in their political attitude. Wow. What's an honorary patriarch or patriarch of Alexandria?
Okay, I lost you there just for a moment. I hope that didn't interrupt anything. So I think I should say a few words about this. It can be very depressing reading about all these betrayals. But the church was founded by Christ to save sinners, and not just little sinners, sometimes big sinners. So that she has in her fold men who are sinners should not surprise us, because we're all sinners. Some are worse than others, and some sins are more public than others. And God willing, these people repented of the sins they committed in their life. But sin has its effect, and the combination of many little sins can lead to great tragedies. And we see in this one report by Albert Hartl that many who betrayed Christ and the church, it was their betrayal that led Hitler get to power. And this should be a very sobering thought to us when we think of committing any sin, especially of voting for a political party. That party is not a Catholic party that serves Jesus Christ. Your vote can lead to something very, very evil. Even if the party you're voting for is only part of a coalition in government and helps other parties attain what it is, it could be used to great evil. And this is something that should make people think very soberly about voting and inspire Catholics to found truly Catholic parties that won't get involved in any of this kind of criminality or psychopathy, because you should not give your vote to people who are not loyal to Christ. It will be misused precisely because they are not loyal to Christ. And so why should you give them your vote? They don't merit it. We should give our vote only to Jesus Christ and those who are loyal to him.
Yeah. Now we're getting into the contacts in France. Wow. You had contacts everywhere.
Yeah, well, you got to remember, at one time, Germany ruled all of France, all of Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, Liechtenstein, Austria, Hungary, Romania, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Denmark, Norway, and had their ally in Italy, and Croatia, what we call Yugoslavia today, Greece, and their allies in Bulgaria, and good sections of North Africa, and most of the Ukraine and Russia. That's pretty much most of Europe. Oh, and Spain was their ally. So, and England was full of Nazi spies. So, and Ireland too. So, was there any part of Europe without Nazi spies?
No.
Let me think. Probably not. Okay. Maybe Portugal. Maybe. Spain sold a good amount of raw materials to the Germans that they couldn't otherwise obtain.
No.
And there was collaboration all over, because people didn't put morality first. They put pragmatism first. And if you are in your first decisions a pragmatist and not a Christian, then you are live your life as a pagan. And Christianity you keep in your wallet to take out when it's important to take out, but it's in your wallet. It's not your life. It's not what you're doing. And Christ should inspire all our things. It's one thing to be discreet, but it's another thing to act on pagan principles.
You're listening to Order Militaris Radio TV live on ordo-militaris.net. If you like what you're hearing, like what you watch, especially yesterday's great program on another prideful man not to imitate Napoleon Bonaparte, please click any of the show topic posts. Scroll all the way down to the bottom where it says make free will monthly donation, and click the blue-green button at the bottom and follow the steps. And we are now on section 2, page 21, informants in France and Belgium, and he names the cardinal.
Yeah, so the level of collaboration went beyond Germany and beyond Germans. So
Cardinal Sued. I read that name.
You say page 20, did you say?
Page 21.
Hmm.
Under the section.
Yeah, the number, what's the number on the page? Because I'm using a different version.
It's page 21 of 65. It's under section 2, informants in France and Belgium.
Okay. Section 2. Yes, okay.
Suet.
Okay, so Cardinal Suhard
Sure.
You know, let me. I don't think Cardinal Suhard was Rampolla.
I heard that name before.
Suhard.
I just don't know where.
The this contact was developed by Father Keller, the prior of the Benedictine monastery of Huros. I guess that's how it's spelled. It's hard to read it. And he informed to the Secret Service office in Stuttgart. He went around French monasteries pretending to copy medieval manuscripts, but in the process, he organized Nazi information networks and gathered information. It's not hard to gather information. Monasteries, monks are very talkative if you can find the right ones.
What did that cardinal do? Seems familiar.
I can't say off the top of my head.
Let me see. Let's see.
Hartel also organized a spy network out of Brussels. Some high-ranking prelates in Brussels, in Belgium, agreed to travel to Rome on a regular basis and keep him informed.
Oh yeah.
Sec was one of them, and a couple of Belgian Dominicans worked for the Nazi Secret Service, watching the Flemish resistant movements and reporting them to Berlin. And chiefly involved in this was Cyril Verschav.
Oh. Emmanuel Celestin Suhard served as Archbishop of Paris. Let's see here. Consecration. Let's see here. He was ordained by Lucidio Cardinal Parocchi.
Parocchi. Parocchi was rather good. Parocchi is the one who ordained St. Pius X. But, you know, you could start good and go rotten, and maybe he felt he had to collaborate to keep priests from being persecuted, but, you know, you should never do things like that. Of course, when Hartel says they collaborated, what does that mean, you know? But if he gave information about the resistance movement, then he was doing, you know, a bad deed.
Let's see. Suhard entered the minor and major seminaries in Laval. He then went to Rome to study at the Pontifical French Seminary and then the Pontifical Gregorian University.
Gregorian, okay, Jesuit, yeah. Just to specify the type of information delivered, as stated by Hartel, his intelligence system acquired the following kinds of information: the copies of encyclicals prior to their publication, secret protocols of bishops' conferences, diocesan circulars to the clergy, triennium reports of bishops de Rode, replies of these triennium reports, papal instructions to the bishops, and regular reports on the general political attitude of leading church personalities. In the central offices of the most important Catholic organizations, similar agents had been won over by the Nazi Secret Service.
Let's see. In 1928, Suhard was appointed Bishop of Bayeux-les-Eaux by Pope Pius XI. He received his episcopal consecration on the following October 3rd from Bishop Grelier, Bishops Florent de la Villarabel and Constant Chauvin. During World War II, the cardinal was detained in his archiepiscopal residence by Nazi forces on June 26, 1940, and addressed a dispatch to Hitler on October 26, 1941 to save the hostages of Nantes and Chateaubriand from From 1945 to 1948, he was president of the Assembly of Cardinals and Archbishops of France, and thus a spokesman of the Church in France.
Mm-hmm. In addition to him, several other important abbots, the Abbot Schmidt of the Groussel Monastery near Breslau, Abbot Albert Graf von Gifferg of the Neuburg Monastery near Stuttgart, Abbot Schockleitner, who was a personal friend of Hitler, Archbishop Klock in Clautern near Bolzano, the Abbot of Metzen, the Prior Keller, Father Elling, a former Benedictine priest. Another former Benedictine priest by the name of Altinger was an informant on church affairs.
Holy cow.
Hawkins, a nephew of the Bishop Knockens of Hildesheim, a Secret Service informant. The Benedictine Germain Morin was an informant.
Another Benedict.
Yeah, a lot of Benedictines. Dr. Behan Dind and Dr. Grunwald, and Benedictine Father Johannes of the Ettel Monastery was close to Goering, had connections with the Secret Service office in Munich. And Hartle claims that this is just the list for Benedictines. You could create similar lists for some 30 other Catholic orders in Germany. But the Benedictines had the most collaborators.
Wow.
Yeah, real betrayal of the Benedictine charism and all. It's no wonder that the monasteries are empty now in Germany.
Yeah.
People like that don't inspire vocations.
Members such as Professor Pine of Turpin, I can't read that. Who during years of research in the Vatican archives passed on information of the highest importance to Special Agent of the SS or Prelate Schopenhauer of the Propaganda Fide at the Vatican, who cooperated with the German military intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
They were in the CDF.
Well, it was called the Holy Office back then. Yeah, they had intelligence work. They had intelligence agents. You know, the one thing about the Germans is when they decide to be evil, they're very efficient at it.
Wow. Let's see.
Well, we could, AJ, I think we could talk about it for years. There's so many names that we could name,
Yeah.
but I encourage people to actually read the dossier.
Yeah.
The lesson we should learn is that human nature doesn't change. So there's probably a lot of clergy and religious in the church today who are agents of globalists, agents of the Chinese government or the Russian government or the German government or the American government or the national government, who are spying on the people of God and undermining the church's effort to preach the gospel. And we can't imagine that this only happened under Nazi Germany, or we're going to be fools. And I can tell you from having met many clergy and many religious, not a few of them behind closed doors are absolute monsters without any conscience or sense of grace. They only pretend to be Catholics in public. And if you knew how many there is, you would be very shaken in your faith. We monks who live in monasteries and have gone to seminaries, we know how many there is. And so we need to pray a lot for the conversion of these very wicked men. They're not outside of the church, they're inside the church. And that's why you should never go to confession except to a very holy man, because these people, with the information you give them, could destroy many people.
A few more questions I put on the show page. How are all the members of the St. Gallen Mafia connected? How deep does this connection go between them to World War II and into the Cold War still reach?
There are Rampolla bishops, or the Rampolla allies, okay? The actual lineages involved. The thing is that we know they're Episcopal lineages because that's published, and but their friendships and the people they associate with, I don't think that's yet been mapped out. So from Rome.info, you can look for an article called The Nazi Forefathers of the St. Gallen Mafia, where I named just a few of the collaborators, this is before I read the dossier, that were involved in what was going on. The Cardinal Insert of Vienna was one. Bishop Alwa-Hudal was one. Hudal was a big pro-German Nazi agent in the Vatican, and he was made a bishop by Cardinal Mary de Waal, who was a cardinal of Belgium and a Rampolla man. And so that's probably the most direct link, was Bishop Hudal, who helped the Nazis escape from Germany and organized and gave information to the German authorities about what was going on in the Vatican. Then there was Bishop Franz Justus Rakowicz, promoted by Cardinal Gaspari, another Rampolla ally. He was actually the chaplain of the Wehrmacht during the Second World War, and he was an enthusiastic Nazi. If you go to that article, I cite at the very end a video showing Nazi paraphernalia that was discovered in a sealed up room in Argentina, to just show you how much material culture of the Nazis was moved to Argentina, and how Argentina became the secret center of the Nazi party after the Second World War. So the fact that, as I said, Bergoglio comes from Argentina is not a coincidence, okay? When he holds the Amazon Synod, you have to understand the bishops of Amazonia are mostly Rampolla men, so he's really saying it's a Rampolla Synod. What he is up to is, in my opinion, to establish what the Nazis want in the Catholic Church, because they want to take over the power base of the church, since they failed to do it through Germany.
And the last question: should Catholics be worried that what they are hearing at the pulpits is actually from these probably continued spy agencies to keep them programmed to not respond, to not react in wanting or ordering a true independent investigation and to stop all of this that continues to this very day?
I would say yes, they should be, because there's really no reason why a man who forsakes everything to be a priest or serve our Lord as a religious should be preaching the Democratic Party from the pulpit, or telling people to go along with the pandemic, or telling people that a heretic can be pope, or that a communion can be given to adulterers, or that Benedict validly resign. Any priest who's doing that knows he's lying, okay, and knows he's just repeating the party line, and that's not his duty as a priest. His duty is to preach the truth and to tell Catholics to be loyal to the truth, and to seek to uncover and expose the lies of men who are not Christians and don't live by Christ's laws. So I never gave this much thought in my life. I've just said, well, I'm going to avoid priests who are heretics or gravely immoral. But once I applied that principle, I started whittling down almost all the clergy, because we're talking about mass apostasy. Right now, there's maybe 4 bishops in the world that recognize Pope Benedict. 2 are public and the other 2 are hidden. And maybe there's a dozen priests that I can name by name. Others may be hidden. But the rest have all given up on the truth. They've all given up on any sense of moral integrity. And they know they're liars. That kind of person could be giving information to the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, the secret services in your country, the KGB, the Italian or the Chinese intelligence operations? Yes, he could. And if they paid him, he'd do it because they have no morals. Okay. And could they be Satanists? Yes, they could. Are they homosexuals and just faking it? Yes, they could. Okay. So this is not because the priesthood is not worthy of trust. This is because evil men, having infiltrated the priesthood and got controls of the center of the formation, only allowed other evil men to join until we have a whole mass of wicked men in the church and in the hierarchy and running things who never were intended by God to be priests, bishops, cardinals, or even popes. And consequently, they don't have the grace of God, and they do everything wrong, and in a way that's injurious to souls and leads souls to damnation. So as Catholics, we each have the duty to follow Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ alone, to practice our Catholic faith faithfully from approved sources like the infallible decrees of ecumenical councils, not Vatican II, which never intended to be fallible, the Catechism of the Council of Trent, the Catechism of St. Pius X. These sound sources of the faith, this shows us what we most certainly should live, okay, and tells us what the gospel really means, especially the canons of the Council of Trent, and to live by them by a rule, and don't let anyone sway you one way or the other. I mean, as soon as Bergoglio said you could commune to adulterers, you should know from the Council of Trent that that is excommunicatable, okay? And to say that his promoting that didn't excommunicate him, and all the bishops and clergy promote that are not excommunicated, is to deny the infallible teaching of Trent and to rebel against Christ, because that's the certain source of the faith. So you have to live by these unchanging principles, by these authoritative and unchanging historic documents. Otherwise, you're not a Catholic anymore. You're being led astray by men who are not worthy of your trust, not in the least, and might actually be working with the deep state or evil organizations to destroy you personally, psychologically, economically, politically, physically, even demographically. So you got to wake up and smell the coffee. You cannot put your trust in men who do not put their trust in God. I mean, it's just common sense. You obey Jesus Christ. You don't obey the Antichrist. You obey the men who are loyal to Christ, not the people who are disloyal to him. Those are the common sense. What we see here in this dossier of Albert Hartl is a man who threw his lot in with the enemies of Christ and got to know a good number of clergy and religious who were just like him, who threw their lot in with the enemies of Christ because they thought the only virtue was being obedient, and they preferred to be obedient to the devil and practice virtue that way. That's how messed up and psychopathic they were. And we cannot follow those lies. So obedience only exists to Christ. We should not be obedient to anyone else except inasmuch as he is obedient to Christ. Okay. So I tell this to everyone, they get shocked. You should not think that Trump is your savior. And if you do, you're committing a sin of idolatry. Okay. Despite how good a man he is, you must obey Jesus Christ, not Trump. Okay. And I'm not an anti-Trumper. I'm just pointing out the level of absolute confusion there is in the church today, where people are throwing their loyalties into any visible leader. They should throw them on Christ alone. Christ is our Savior. Christ is our King. Christ is our Lord. Christ is our teacher. Christ is our master. He led the way. He is our exemplar. We should imitate him, follow him, and obey him. We should not make compromises with the world or with worldly politics or worldly political institutions, and we should not change our faith to please wicked and godless men. Okay, and Albert Hartl is a complete tragedy as a moral person. He's a bigger tragedy than the man we spoke of the other day, Napoleon Bonaparte, because I don't see any evidence that Hartl repented at the end of his days, but who's to say? I haven't read his biography, if anyone ever wrote one.
Yeah. Well, that's the end of our show today, folks, but stay tuned for next week's set of shows, which are already set up. On Monday, we'll do our series on update on terrorism around the world, where we'll bring you each Monday updates on terrorism, Christian persecution, news stories not shared in the mainstream news media. On Tuesday, we will cover the dangers of groupthink and how did groupthink get started. And Wednesday, we are going to talk about Who is Major General George Washington? Who was it that he saw in at Valley Forge? And the question that keeps coming up, did he become a Catholic on his deathbed? And Thursday, wait, Monday, yeah, Thursday, the communist infiltration of the Catholic Church. You don't want to miss that. It will be another eye-opening with including information from the convert Bella Dodd that Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen helped to bring back to the Catholic faith. And Friday, we are going to literally grab hold of the third rail. Who is Margaret Sanger and her connection to the Nazi Party, and including the one, the only, the father of Bill Gates Sr. And Saturday, a story I really wanted to cover, the real story of the War of the Vendée.
Sounds like a great lineup, AJ.
Now, you can find all these programs on ordo-militaris.net. Look up at the menu bars, click upcoming, and all the upcoming shows are right there. And please feel free to make a monthly subscription donation by clicking any of these show topics and scrolling down to the greenish blue button and following the steps. And if you want that flag that's behind brother, tell him how.
Okay, so as we point out, it's very important to be a true Catholic, a faithful Catholic, and shout it from the rooftops. And one of the great ways to do that is with a Lepanto flag, which is the flag of Marco Antonio Colonna, High Admiral of the Catholic Fleet at the Battle of Lepanto. That flag was raised at noon on October 7th that year, 1571. And with Our Lady's help and the valiant fighting of the Catholic Marines and sailors, they won a battle against a force that was like 2 or 3 times bigger than themselves. So this is a historical reproduction. It's 1 meter by 1.5 meters. It's printed on nylon. It can take water and sun. It's hung as a gonfalon, so it's very long, and it's beautiful, bright colors with our Lord's cross and the shields of Venice, the papacy, St. Pius V, that is, the Kingdom of Spain, and Don Juan of Austria at the foot of the cross to show that they put their trust in Christ's blood. And ordo-militaris.us, that's .us, not like the radio, which is .net, is selling this flag. You go to their website, shop, and then flags, or you can order that, which is the large one. There's also a smaller one, and then we have our own blue cross flag, if you'd like one of the order. So, and neither AJ nor I take a salary. We do what we do as volunteers, who are very unlike all the other internet talking heads who it's just give me. Everything received by Ordo Militaris Inc. or Ordo Militaris Net goes to the apostolate, either of the radio or helping persecuted Christians. So please help us out. Think of getting a flag, and if you do get one of these flags, tell AJ you heard about it on the radio, and half the proceeds will go to equipment and fees that Ordo Militaris Radio needs or must pay to make these transmissions available to you.
We'll see you next week, everybody. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.
And let's see.